Hey there, we are live and we are streaming our Energy Town Hall over my X account, over our Breakthrough YouTube account, and also on my bigger page, my bigger Facebook page. So this is Steve Goreham, as you can see, and we're in just a very few couple minutes. We are going to start the presentation, and it is energy, climate change, and public policy, fact or fiction. That is Steve Goreham's title for this whole presentation. I really do hope you stick with us. We're going to try and keep it to about an hour long presentation, but it's really important that people understand this issue. I know you guys liked my pension town hall, but I'll tell you what, I honestly think the energy town hall is even more important because there are moving legislation down in Springfield. And so people need to be aware of what's going on this particular topic. You'll find Steve's presentation enlightening and also entertaining at the same time. As you can't see right now, but we've got some Al Gore clips to play, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden. He's put a really great presentation together for us tonight. And you'll also be able to ask questions at the end. And if you want to ask questions, you're just going to type them into the comment section. And one of my assistants will read those questions back to me as we go on and on. So it's 7 o'clock now, and we have climate change, energy, and public policy, fact or fiction. That is the title of our town hall. We're just letting it populate a little bit more. We know as we continue to go through this presentation, more people will be added to the conversation, more people will be watching. We also know that we're going to get lots of views on this after the fact, and that's just fine with me too. So why don't we just get started? I'm Jeannie Ives. I am the founder of Breakthrough Ideas and also a radio show host, The Real Story with Jeannie Ives. You can catch that on AM 560 Sunday night, 7 to 9 p.m. And with me is Steve Goreham. He's the executive director of the Climate Science Coalition of America and the author of 4 books on energy, climate change, sustainable development, and public policy, with over 100,000 copies in print. His latest book is Green Breakdown: The Coming Renewable Energy Failure. That's just a great title, Steve, because I think that we are going to be seeing a renewable energy failure. You're going to prove that up over the course of our discussion. But before we begin, let me just tell the audience very, very quickly why this is so important. So in 2021, they passed the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act of 2021. This was an extraordinary extension of legislation. And the Illinois House and Senate finally agreed and passed an omnibus, which is an omnibus, massive energy bill that was signed by the governor. Now, BOMA, which is BOMA Chicago, wrote a very good description of what, in essence, this bill was about. And I'm going to read a little bit from it. And in fact, they said Illinois will have some of the most significant clean energy and decarbonization commitments in the nation through this legislation. It will require Illinois to be reliant on 100% renewable energy by 2050. That's a fiction. It will also provide $694 million in subsidies for nuclear power, expands aid programs for renewable energy, and takes steps to provide jobs and clean communities. So there's a physical component to this. There's a jobs component to this. There's an ideological component to this legislation, and they passed it with, unfortunately, bipartisan support. BOMA writes, in the end, the 958 pages of the act establishes a range of new programs, requirements, and costs intended to support clean energy, existing nuclear, proposed renewable energy assets, electrical vehicles and infrastructure, energy efficiency programs, and social justice and job training programs. Okay, all right. Now, what else can we expect with this? Analysis done by BOMA Chicago estimates that for all customers in the ComEd service area, the total cost increase will be about $9.5 billion over the next 10 years and will represent a major rate increase that will be borne by Illinois businesses. For BOMA Chicago members, that translates into a cumulative increase of about $1.2 million for a large office building and as much as $7.8 million for those that fall into the extra large commercial customer rate. The total cost of legislation is more than $800 million annually that will be paid by Illinois families and businesses. And I won't go into the rest, but I mean, again, nuclear subsidies, renewable portfolio standards increase, essentially renewable energy, clean energy, they call it, by 2050, get rid of coal, get rid of fossil fuels. That is their plan. Put in a bunch of wind and solar and say that that's going to solve all of our energy needs. It won't. So this bill is obviously not working. And in fact, 2 years later, Chicago Sun-Times writes an article, Pritzker's signature climate law has seen slow progress on clean energy, green job promises. Of course it has. Nothing is working about this legislation. They continue to tweak it. Their next tweak, and the reason, the impetus for this entire discussion tonight, is the fact that they truly believe that if they add battery storage for wind and solar, that everything will be hunky-dory and we will not have any problems at all. Now, this is going to cost us an enormous amount of money and at the same time not work. And so Steve Goreham and I will get into that a little bit further. I've got an article here that discusses how Cunningham, Democrat Senator Cunningham and Democrat Rep Evans, they've introduced this bill and it's going to get costly and they claim it's going to solve everything. It won't. Steve's going to explain all of that. But without further ado, I'm going to move to Steve. Do you want to give a quick introduction or just go start straight with your slide presentation, Steve?
Just nothing major. And Jeannie, great to join you and great to join the viewers tonight. I'm a researcher, an author of 4 books. I do many radio and TV shows, and I try and talk to people about the real facts about energy, about climate change, sustainable development, public policy. And I do that full time. And it's a little bit of a minority point of view, if you will. I'll admit that most of our political leaders say they think the world is in danger from man-made warming, but the evidence doesn't seem to support that. So we'll get into climate and energy and public policy and what's going on in Illinois and some other things. Should be interesting.
All right, terrific, great. Let's just start the presentation here. Add that to the stage. There you go.
Well, you got to go back a couple slides.
Oops.
There you go. Okay, go to the next one. Next one's a outline. So we'll start and we'll talk first about climate change, fact and fiction, then about net zero renewables and electric vehicles, what's going on in those areas. Talk about Illinois and federal energy policy, and we can get into batteries there and other things at that point. And then some possible futures. A bit of a disclaimer up front, I'm not in the pay of any energy company. I do not hold any energy stock, except possibly in a mutual fund. Anyway, next. Climate change fact and fiction. One of the things that is driving energy regulation and legislation in Illinois is the fear of man-made warming, the idea that humans are causing dangerous climate change, and so we have to do all sorts of things to try and get rid of hydrocarbon fuels and replace them with wind, solar, batteries, and other things. Next, let's hear from Mr. Former Vice President Al Gore.
Moment of decision. Our home, Earth, is in danger. What is at risk of being destroyed is not the planet itself, of course, but the conditions that have made it hospitable for human beings.
So that was part of Al Gore's testimony before the Senate in 2009. And so let's go down a couple slides. There you go. That one is good. And Mr. Gore is in good company. Today, we have more than 180 heads of state of the nations of the world that say that humans are causing dangerous climate change. And the theory of man-made warming is accepted by the United Nations, most of our major scientific organizations, most of our Fortune 500 companies, the news media, and most of our leading universities. And the world is spending about $2 trillion a year on renewables to try and stop the planet from warming. So next, we also get a lot of things about temperatures. And over the last 2 years, we've had many headlines saying, for example, that July of 2023 was the hottest month in 120,000 years. Many have talked about these years being the hottest ever. And the United Nations has said that the era of global boiling has arrived. Unfortunately, these really aren't correct. And I'm going to go through a little bit of evidence on that. If you want to go to the next slide, Jeannie. So temperatures have warmed since about 1880, but not very much. It's estimated they've gone up about 1 degree Celsius or about 2 degrees Fahrenheit in 140 years. 1880 is a pretty good milestone because that's when we first had thermometers on Earth. And prior to 1880, scientists used things called temperature proxies, which are chemical changes in the environment that move the same way that temperature does. And this is a graph of ice core proxies from ice cores in Greenland. And if you start on the right at present day, you can go back 2, 4, 6, 8, 10,000 years to the end of the last ice age. And you see that the temperatures rise and fall and rise and fall about every 1,000 years or so to our modern warm period. So a couple things from this chart. First, climate is always changing. You know, the statement climate change is real is just very foolish. That's like saying water is wet. I don't know any intelligent person that doesn't think the climate change. The real question is what is causing that change. The second thing that you see from this chart is that we've had many, many warm periods in the last 10,000 years that were warmer than today. And these were multi-century long periods when it was warmer than today. So today's climate is not historically warm. And if you go on, and by the way, Jeannie, if you just want to chime in, just go ahead and chime in. But the next slide shows a little bit of evidence of this. This is a picture from an ice cave under the Mendenhall Glacier. The Mendenhall Glacier is near Juneau, Alaska.
Hey, I visited that. I was just there in April. And they literally plan out, they show you how the glacier has receded year by year. They have that all mapped out.
Yeah, it's been receding for more than 100 years. And a lot of people say this is evidence of man-made climate change. Mm-hmm. But about 10 years ago, we had scientists from Southeast Alaska University that went into ice caves inside the Mendenhall Glacier. This is a picture inside one of the ice caves. The ice is over the top. And what the arrow is pointing to is a tree stump. And that tree stump has roots in the ground, and it's about 1 foot in diameter. And there are many, many of these tree stumps. And they radiocarbon dated these and found that they were a little more than 1,000 years old. They grew up during a period called the medieval warm period, a little more than 1,000 years ago. And so the evidence shows that where today we have a glacier, 1,000 years ago we had a forest in this location. We've had many, many times in the past when it's been warmer than today. Okay. Anyway, on to the next. So scientists blame the man-made global warming on what they call the greenhouse effect. Sunlight enters our atmosphere. What isn't reflected by clouds is absorbed by the surface of the Earth. Like any warm body, the Earth gives off lower energy infrared radiation. And that's invisible, but it's there, and it goes out into space. A tiny amount goes directly out into space, but almost all is captured by greenhouse gases in our atmosphere. And those gases then re-radiate that energy, and that does tend to warm the surface of the Earth. And you hear that over and over, but people don't really know the whole story. Next slide. So I often ask audiences, what is nature's most abundant greenhouse gas? And people will say carbon dioxide, or they'll say methane, which are both greenhouse gases, but they don't realize that Earth's dominant greenhouse gas is water vapor. Somewhere between 70 and 90% of Earth's greenhouse effect is due to water vapor and clouds. Next slide.
Okay.
So
and also, did you want to have David Suzuki on at any time? I can't remember what slide we were at.
It's the next one. It's after this. Sorry. So if we break down the greenhouse effect and we say, okay, we're conservative. We say, let's say about 3/4 of it is caused by water vapor and clouds. Then the last quarter of the greenhouse effect is caused by carbon dioxide and methane and other gases. But then you need to say, well, how much of that quarter is due to our industry? Because the oceans hold 50 times as much carbon dioxide dissolved as is in the atmosphere. And the oceans are always releasing carbon dioxide and absorbing it. When plants die, they release carbon dioxide. And when they grow, they absorb it. And so most of this last quarter is natural. every day nature puts 20 times as much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere as all of our industries do, and nature removes about the same amount. And so when you roll this all together, you find that humans are responsible for about 1 or 2% of Earth's greenhouse effect. That means if we completely eliminate all emissions, we might not even be able to measure the change in temperature. Human effects are very, very small, but again, none of that ever comes up in the press.
Steve,
Okay.
what you just discussed,
Yep.
is that in dispute by other climate scientists, or it sounds to me like this is about the level of an 8th grade science class?
Well, this comes from the IPCC. It comes from Gavin Schmidt's paper. What climate scientists have assumed is that the Earth is steady state. It doesn't change. And so everything we add to the atmosphere increases the CO2, but that's not the case. The carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has been changing throughout all of history. So this is really the main thing. The Earth is driving carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and all weather, as I'll talk about a little bit.
So real quick though, one of their
Yeah.
big pushes is for carbon sequestration, and they want carbon neutrality, which means that anything that you were to emit, you have to somehow take it out in another way. So is that, and now you're telling us that they're trying to affect 1 to 2% of all man-made CO2 that may be a greenhouse gas effect, and this is a fool's errand.
Yeah, it's pretty small, and there's another. I'm kind of going off track here, but there's another law in chemistry called I don't know. Let me see what. I'm forgetting it here. Anyway, let's go on. Okay. So let's put Dr. Suzuki up.
CO2 levels rise, temperatures rise. The result, as the world gets warmer, the climate changes, and extreme weather events become more common.
Okay, next slide.
Okay.
Well, that was Dr. David Suzuki, and
Yep.
he sounds convincing that weather events are more extreme, but that's not what the evidence shows. This is just one example. Over the last 50 years, scientists have been able to use satellite data. Satellites look down on the surface of the Earth, and they measure every tropical cyclone on the surface of the Earth. So this is global data here, and that produces 3 curves. By the way, they can measure the wind speeds of every storm as well. The top orange curve there, or red curve, shows the number of tropical storms on the surface of the Earth over any 12-month period, and there are typically about 90 of those. The middle blue curve shows the number of stronger hurricanes that are on the surface of the Earth. Typically, there are about 45 of those. And the bottom green curve is the number of major hurricanes. Now, when you look at this data, we see the number of storms bouncing up and down, but there's really not a rise in the number of storms. And this is also a measure of storm strength, because over time, if tropical storms are getting stronger, more of them would exceed the wind speed to become hurricanes. And so the number of hurricanes would be rising. But it isn't happening. That's not what the data shows.
Okay.
Let's go on to sea level a little bit. Now, Dr. James Hansen of NASA and former Vice President Al Gore have predicted a 20-foot sea level rise by the year 2100. If that were to happen, that would be a disaster. It would flood the major ports of the world. And this graph here is a simulation of what would happen with a 20-foot sea level rise. All those red areas would be flooded in Florida. But a couple things for your viewers to know. Next slide. Oceans have been rising for the last 20,000 years. This curve is a simplified graph from NASA, the National Aeronautic and Space Administration. NASA estimates that our oceans have gone up 120 meters, or 390 feet, in the last 20,000 years. And no climate scientist can tell you when natural sea level rise stopped and man-made sea level rise began. But the best tide gauges, like the one on the right, show that oceans are rising at a rate of 7 or 8 inches per century. So the good news is that it's very unlikely we're going to have a 20-foot rise by 2100. Uh, and if someone is telling you that we can all drive electric cars and stop the oceans from rising, I think you better get some better advice.
I mean, Venice has been underwater forever, right? And
Well,
they
and
seem to
again,
figure it out. Mhm.
again, the only proper rational response to climate is adaptation,
Yes.
like the Netherlands has done for centuries now. They build seawalls and they build islands, and that's the proper way to do it. And there's a bunch of other examples as well. Anyway, let's put on Justin Trudeau on the next slide, please.
Proposes that the price on carbon pollution should start at a minimum of $10 per ton in 2018, rising by $10 each year to $50 per ton in 2022.
Next slide. Oh, go forward one more.
There you
Okay,
go.
so viewers tonight, that statement by Mr. Trudeau is bizarre. Carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. It's an odorless, harmless, invisible gas. What you see rising from the cooling tower or smokestack of a power plant, that is not carbon dioxide. You can't see carbon dioxide. In this image, that is condensing water vapor. We breathe in only a trace of carbon dioxide, only 4 of every 10,000 molecules, but we continuously burn sugars in our bodies, so every person exhales about 100 times the concentration of what we breathed in. Matter of fact, each person exhales about 2 pounds of carbon dioxide every single day. Next slide. And even beyond that,
Well, we need less people, apparently. That's the solution.
yes, people, yes, that's another thing. CO2 is green.
Yeah.
Carbon dioxide is plant food. It's essential for life on Earth. Hundreds of peer-reviewed studies show that plants grow bigger and faster with higher levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide. These are graphs of the world's top 7 food crops: corn, potatoes, wheat, sugarcane, rice, soybeans, and sugar beets, which all grow between 20 and 65% bigger with higher levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide.
And don't
Plants
forget
get
the
bigger
marijuana
fruits.
growers, what the marijuana growers do, right? They pump
Yes.
CO2 in to their greenhouses.
They do. Yeah, sometimes I show those slides where the guy's growing how to grow marijuana, and he's got a big black canister of carbon dioxide there, and literally they are smarter than our political leaders, the marijuana growers.
Of course.
So plants get bigger fruits, they get bigger vegetables, they get thicker tree stems, they get bigger root systems. They're more resistant to drought. Literally, carbon dioxide is probably the best compound we could put into the biosphere that we could. But today we have every university, every company counting their carbon dioxide footprint. Very, very foolish.
Mhm.
Okay, next slide, and I will conclude on climate change here. So climate change is natural. It's not man-made. It's dominated by natural cycles of the earth, probably driven by the sun. I talk about that in each of my first 2 books, Climatism and the Mad, Mad, Mad World of Climatism. And human greenhouse gases play only a minor role in global warming. By the way, I should talk about the funny climate change item for today.
Okay.
So the CNN just published an article today that said why climate change could affect your credit score. You know, I knew there was something wrong with my credit score, and now I finally figured it out. It's got to be climate change that's ruining my credit score. But anyway, look that up online and see what their logic is.
Oh, look, they've lost all credibility on it, quite frankly, after, hiding for Biden. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
So let's move on to net zero renewables and electric vehicles.
This is where it gets fun. All right.
Next slide. So today we live in a golden age of low-cost energy. Global energy consumption is up by a factor of 30 since 1800, and still about 80% of our energy comes from hydrocarbons, which are natural gas, coal, and oil. Next. And a great untold story is cleaner air. We hear all this stuff about how our air has problems, but I remember days when we were driving when I was a child past Gary steel mills, and our windshield was coated on the expressway. We literally had to pull off and wipe off our windshield from what was in the atmosphere. But the data from the Environmental Protection Agency shows that a composition of our 6 main pollutants, carbon dioxide, lead, nitrogen dioxide, ozone, particulates, and sulfur dioxide, is down about 80% since 1970. That's the top blue curve. The bottom orange curve shows that the volatile organic compounds from our vehicle tailpipes is down 95% over the same period. So a good story.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Next. But as you know, we have many people that want to end fossil fuels. This is a quote, Fatih Birol, the executive director of the International Energy Agency, said, if governments are serious about the climate crisis, there can be no new investments in oil, gas, and coal from this year. So this is a real head scratcher. I think Director Birol has a smartphone, and that's made from hydrocarbons and plastics. He's got on a suit coat and a tie and a shirt, and those things come from synthetics and the plastics. Probably has shoes on, maybe not, but those come from synthetics also. Next slide. But it's not only our smartphones and our clothing, all of our medicines, all of our medical supplies. 95% of the world's fuel for ships, trucks, planes, cars comes from hydrocarbons, and they're made in factories that use hydrocarbons. We have plastics and chemicals everywhere that come from hydrocarbons. And half of the world's food uses synthetic nitrogen fertilizer that's made from natural gas, or in the case of China, made from coal. Our modern society is based on hydrocarbons. Next.
Absolutely.
Nevertheless, in the US, we now have 23 states and more than 200 cities that have net zero electricity targets by 2050. Illinois is one of those states, of course.
Yeah.
And the goal here is to force adoption of wind and solar. Next. But the real question is, can the grid run on wind and solar? 3 big problems here, and I'll even get to a 4th one in a little while. But the first is land area, the second is cost, and the third is intermittency. Next. Now, in my book, Green Breakdown, I talk about work by a guy named Vaclav Smil, a scientist in Canada. And he has written a book where he looked at the land required to generate electricity. And he looked at everything for a source, including pipelines and waste pits and mines. And he finds that if you set nuclear at 1 unit of land for 1 unit of electrical output, the natural gas and coal are about the same. But look at those renewables on the right side of that chart. To produce 1 unit of electricity, solar requires more than 100 units of land, wind between 33 and 835 units of land. The 33 is if you just count the concrete footpads and the roads, but the 835 is if you count the whole area. And then biomass is way off the scale, 1,500 units of land to produce 1 unit of electricity. Next. So you have this, and this is a facility example here. These are both from California. The one on the left is the Ivanpah Solar Facility, which produces 793 gigawatt hours a year.
Not anymore. It's defunct. It's done.
They're closing it down. We're going to save a lot of birds.
Yes.
But it was producing. It still is. I don't think they've quite shut it down yet. But,
okay.
It uses 3,500 acres. The Diablo Canyon nuclear plant produces 16,000 gigawatt hours a year on 750 acres. So there's that 100-to-1 ratio. The nuclear plant produces 20 times the output on 1/5 of the land.
But I mean, I think I want to pause here for a minute. I mean, that solar facility is going away. It is destroyed, and it is leaving in its wake just area strewn with solar panels that are not operational anymore, that I don't know if they'll ever pull them up out of the ground.
And clean it up.
It's going to be a disaster.
It was only in operation about 10 years, never reached its output, and it got billions of dollars in subsidies. Just an example of a prime example of, and by the way, it killed hundreds and hundreds of birds. They actually called them streamers. These birds would fly in this sunlight reflected up to the towers, and they would start smoking, and then you go down and hit the ground. So just not a real environmentally friendly piece of work.
But right now, they want to turn productive Illinois farm ground into an Ivanpah solar facility. That's what they want to do. In fact, they are doing it.
Well, we're hoping that people are going to get smart and push back a little bit.
Well, they're still building it right now. They're super proud of the one that's right outside of Champaign. And, oh, we're going to power Chicago from Champaign on this massive solar farm. I can't remember. 4,000 acres? No, I think more than that. Anyway. Okay, next, I guess.
Okay, next. Now, one of the problems with if you need 100 times the land, and these things are spread all over, and the wind's up on ridge lines, and the solar's out in the desert and all over, what do you need? Well, you need to connect all those systems. And so you got to build all these big transmission towers everywhere. Wind and solar compared to a gas or a coal, where the plant is pretty close to the city, requires vastly more transmission, 2 or 3 times as much transmission. And that's one of the reasons why wind and solar are having trouble getting deployed. Next. Okay, but aren't renewables the cheapest electricity? You hear this in the press all the time. Wind power prices lower than natural gas. Wind and solar are the cheapest new sources. Renewables increasingly beat even the cheapest coal competitors. But they're talking about the price of generating, but that's not the whole cost of electricity. You have to have transmission. You have to have other things. Next slide. This is one of my favorite slides. I've been graphing this for about 8 years. This shows the cost and the wind and solar for countries in Europe. And we also have the USA on there. Now, the vertical axis shows the wind and solar capacity of a nation, and that's the watts per person. And the horizontal axis shows the residential price of a nation. So if you look at this now, if wind and solar were cheaper, the nations that put in the most wind and solar would have the lowest electricity prices. But we see the exact opposite. We have Austria, where the price is roughly twice the US price. And then we have Denmark and Germany with the biggest concentration of wind and solar in probably in the world, wind anyway. And those are way up there 3 times the United States price. So this idea that renewables are cheapest just doesn't bear out. Next slide.
Well, you can't put a price on climate change.
This is a little different metric. This is the United States. And what I've plotted here are the 16-year price increase, electricity price increase for the top 12 wind states. And that blue line across the middle is the national average increase over 16 years. I've been plotting this for a while also. This data is from the U.S. Department of Energy. The electricity price over 16 years has gone up 33%, which isn't bad, about like inflation. But note that 7 of the 12 leading wind states have prices that have been rising faster than the national average. Illinois there is right about on the average because of all the nuclear have, I think. Look at California, 116% over that period. That's green California. And again, the problem is all the land that's taken, and you have to build transmission everywhere. So again, another example where wind and solar just aren't cheaper. Not true.
Okay.
Okay, next. We got to put in a video here. Let's before you do this
video.
one.
Okay. Yeah. Here we go.
Put in Mark Christie.
Very dire consequences, potentially catastrophic consequences in the United States in terms of the reliability of our grid. And I think that the basic reason is we're facing a shortfall of power supply. We are facing cascading retirements of dispatchable resources, specifically coal and, to a lesser extent, gas. And the problem with losing that many dispatchable resources is you're losing the supply that's going to keep the lights on.
Now, Mark Christie was on the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. This was 2 years ago. He testified before the Senate. President Trump has now appointed him to be the head of FERC. But yeah, we have this issue with intermittency. And let's go to the next slide there, the wind intermittency that you had up. So wind intermittency is fundamentally incompatible with reliable power. This is a look for a single month at the wind systems in Texas, and they have quite a few wind systems. They produce up to 10,000 megawatts on a given day. But then if you look within a day or within 2 days, they can drop all the way down to 0. And so the grid operators know that if they want to keep their system so that blackouts don't occur, they have to keep the coal or the natural gas or other systems around to be there when the wind doesn't blow, and in the case of solar, when the solar doesn't shine either.
So is this a good time to maybe talk about what happened in Spain recently? Because we have an actual real world current example of them, being so proud of the fact that they were 100% renewable. And then 2 weeks later, poof.
That's 2 slides down. So go to the next
down.
slide.
Okay, we'll go. All right, sorry.
3 slides down, I guess. So this is a great picture of a young girl in England cleaning off those solar panels. Can't you just feel that solar power there? Yeah. Okay, next slide. So we've had some blackouts in the United States.
Yeah.
California had rolling blackouts in August of 2020. California gets about 20% of its electricity from solar in August until about 6 p.m. at night. And then by 7 p.m. it's gone. And if you have anything else that fails, you have to institute rolling blackouts. You have to shut down demand to match the supply. In Texas in February 2021, we had lethal blackouts. Electricity there was off for 72 hours to 4.5 million people. And more than 200 people died during that blackout period. That's more than any hurricane in history except one. So these are really important things that we got to make sure our grid is reliable. Okay, now let's go on to Spain. So this is we're missing some of the text here, but it's okay. We had historic blackouts earlier this month in Spain and Portugal. 60 million people lost power for about a day or half a day. And it was crazy. They had electric trains, 35,000 people on electric trains that just stopped. And they stopped in mountains and they stopped in tunnels. They had to go rescue these people. Just 2 weeks earlier, as you mentioned, Jeannie, they had announced that they hit 100% renewable electricity from wind and solar.
But I think what people don't understand is that these electrical systems that power our lives are very complicated to the extent that they need to be balanced, and you can't just bring wind and solar on all the time. My husband works in this industry, which is why I also have a very big interest in it. And he talks a lot about what he builds: transmission lines, he builds substations. He understands how important it is to have that stability. And I got to tell you, people just think they turn on the switch and voila, by magic, you get power. That's not the case.
Absolutely right on. So the demand for electricity and the amount you generate has to be almost equal within a few seconds at any point in time. And the grid operators work to keep those equal. And if they're not equal, if the demand falls or rises and the generation doesn't change, then the voltage starts changing and the AC frequency starts changing as well from 60 hertz to something else. And if you change about 2 or 3%, you start damaging equipment that is hooked to the network. And so grid operators have to handle this. Now, what happened in Spain and Portugal, it wasn't a storm. It wasn't any special even intermittency, but they had some of the system go off. And I should mention, Now the traditional systems, which are coal or natural gas or hydro, power these big spinning turbines. And these turbines have a built-in stability. If the power goes off for a second, the turbines still spin and still generate. And so you have a built-in stability. But when you remove all those turbines and you have wind and solar, those don't have any stability at all. So what happened in Spain and Portugal is some of the solar went down, and one network went down, and then it just triggered all these others to go down. Within 5 seconds, the entire system shut down across the continent. There was no way they could prevent it from happening. So this is the fourth big problem. In addition to land area and cost and intermittency, the stability is going to be a big issue.
All right.
Okay, let's go on to electrification. Of course, we have a big electrification movement. State of Illinois and Michigan and many others are trying to force the adoption of electricity from renewables by eliminating natural gas and propane heating fuels, forcing people to go to heat pumps. And then, of course, a big push for electric vehicles. Get rid of your gasoline or diesel vehicle and get an electric vehicle. Next, or chime in.
Well, I
People don't
mean,
realize-
Illinois wants 1 million. They want 1 million EVs on the road by 2030. It's complete
Yep.
nonsense. I don't even think we have 150,000 registered right now. I usually check it. You can check it once a month. I mean, they actually track this. And it's not going to happen. They're trying to build out the electrification system for the charging stations, but
Yep.
it's outrageous.
Well, and again, I'm not against electric vehicles or wind or solar. I am against governments forcing people to take these and saying you can't use other sources of energy, and we're going to stop the oceans from rising, or we make the storms less severe if we do this. That's modern superstition. Anyway, we have a war going on in the United States over gas appliances right now. Your gas stove, your water heater, your furnace. We have 7 states that have, where cities or towns have banned gas in new construction. Matter of fact, the state of New York is the worst. They have banned by 2026 all construction gas appliances. They want everybody to use a heat pump.
You know, 95% of Illinoisans get their heat through natural gas.
Okay, yeah.
So, I mean, I
Probably
don't
so.
understand. So you're going to retrofit everybody's house because you have some ideological dream that natural gas is terrible when it's clean and it's and it's affordable. And anyway,
It's not a good idea. And by the way, so the good news is, and we have 24 states that have passed laws prohibiting city or county.
I don't know what's happening there. We had a little internet issue. Steve, are you with us still? We lost what? No, he's just frozen for a moment.
There we go.
There you go, back with us. All right.
Okay, let's move on to President Biden and the electric car video.
Oh, okay, sure, absolutely. Let's get that up.
We can own the 21st century market again by moving to electric vehicles.
Okay.
Is he in an electric vehicle? Is that an EV?
I don't think so.
I don't think it is.
People have pointed that
either.
out, but that's okay. Next slide.
Okay.
Oh, one more.
Yep.
So electric vehicles have been penetrating world markets. Last year, about 18% of the new light vehicles sold globally were electric models. China has taken off on that. They got like 35%. US were at about 7 or 8%. And at the end of last year, there were about 48 million EVs on the road out of 1.6 billion light vehicles, about 3%. Next. But 2024 was not a real good year. We had flat EV sales. They actually lost share in Europe. A lot of the automakers announced they were pulling back on their models. The consulting firm McKinsey & Company took a survey in the US and also globally, but in the US, they found that 46% of current EV owners said they would go back to a fuel car the next time around, which is not a real good statistic. And then Hertz Rental, the CEO there, pushed a program. They acquired 80,000 EVs, but then they found that they were more expensive to repair, more expensive to insure. And when people flew into airports, they didn't, even if they were EV owners, they didn't want to rent an EV because they'd have to mess around with charging it. People like to charge at home. And so it appears that the early adopter phase is over. People that have want a cool Tesla for the second car probably have them. But if you're in an apartment and you have to run a charging cable over the public walkway, it's not really such a good idea.
Well, I mean, in Illinois too, we're subsidizing Rivian to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars. And, we should not be having to do that. If people want to
So
buy them, great, but I'm tired of the subsidizing of them.
that's a bad investment too. Rivian, I think, lost 450 million last year on 550 million in sales. I don't understand why people keep giving them money, but by the way, Nikola went bankrupt, another big EV outfit, just earlier this year. Okay, next
So
slide.
did Lion Electric. Lion Electric too did, and
Yeah.
we were going to invest in that. Mhm.
So EV advantages, the real big one, and I probably should put it in capital letters there, is charge at home. That can be inexpensive. People are driving short distances, can be convenient, faster acceleration. The engines are simpler and should be lower maintenance, but one of the problems is the cars are heavier, and so the tires wear out faster. Next. So on the top right side, that's supposed to be a little model of a Honda Civic, which has a 12.4 gallon gas tank, gets 77.5 pounds of fuel, and can go 360 miles. If you take that 77 pounds and put it into a battery over on the left, a Chevy Volt, you can go a total of 21 miles. You have to increase the battery by a factor of 17 to be able to go 360 miles again. And so this means that EVs are going to be about 50% heavier than traditional cars. And by the way, they should then pay 50% more road taxes if you want to be equitable about it. Next. But aren't they environmentally friendly? Everybody says, well, yeah, they give off a little bit less carbon dioxide, which we shouldn't be worried about anyway. But the problem is, for example, the International Energy Agency points out that an EV requires 7 times the special metals, mostly in the battery, than a internal combustion engine car. Mm-hmm. And these are copper and cobalt and lithium and other things. And people say, wow, my EV is really environmentally friendly, but they don't look back at the supply chain to get that EV together. And that's where the story is not too pleasing. An example is cobalt. The top right picture is a picture of mining. The Democratic Republic of Congo is the biggest miner of cobalt ore in the world. And they're using child labor and forced labor to get that ore out of the hills. And then they ship much of that to China, who is the biggest refiner of metals in the world. That bottom image is a picture of a place called Rare Earth Lake. And for as far as you can see for miles around, the land has been polluted by metal waste from refining. And then they get that battery together and your car comes to the United States and your battery, and you say, wow, aren't I environmentally friendly? But people don't really see the chain in what's going on with EVs. Okay, next. So the other thing is cold weather, of course, and this is a big issue in Illinois. And you remember particularly, I think it was a year and a half ago when we had people pushing their cars around trying to charge them, and it got down to about 0. The facts are that EVs lose about 20% of their driving range at 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And then below about 10 degrees Fahrenheit, you just can't charge them. And so you got to be careful with that. And by the way, in Canada, they now have a 100% vehicle emissions mandate, which says by 2035, if you don't heat your garage, you won't be able to charge your car from about January to January or February.
Well, we've covered it before, but we know that the Bloomington Normal transit buses that are EVs, they charge them in a heated garage, but never between 2 and 7 p.m. because it's too expensive. I mean, they literally wrote that email to Rivian. Rivian asked, hey, how do you charge your vehicles? And that was their response. Well, we do it in a heated garage. I mean, this is just insane.
Expensive. Okay, next on to Illinois energy policy. And the next slide after that. We have a Trump administration upheaval going on right now. President Trump has dropped a bomb on renewables. He has halted all leases for offshore wind. He is canceling green energy funding and mandates, including possibly shutting down the climate models, which are at NASA and NOAA and the Department of Energy. And he's just slashing programs. Now he's going to need Congress to help, but I'm unfortunate. I'm unhappy to report that a lot of even Republicans are trying to keep the Inflation Reduction Act, a vast sea of money on the order of 100 billion a year to renewables that they don't seem to want to cut. So also Mr. Trump has withdrawn us from the Paris Climate Agreement.
All right, next.
Now in Illinois, we're fortunate. We have a lot of nuclear. Last year, 54% of our electricity came from nuclear, which is a very stable source. About 18% from natural gas, 15% from coal, and wind was down at 14%. But the state goals are to get rid of all that coal and natural gas and try and do that with wind and solar. And that's going to be very, very expensive. Batteries as well. Okay, let's go next and talk about those batteries.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a couple bill right now, House Bill 5856, Senate Bill 3959, looking to create 8,500 megawatts of grid scale storage. And the article that you sent me said 15,000 megawatts or 15 gigawatts of grid scale storage. And they're claiming these are going to lower Illinois power bills. Yeah, not
How
really.
do they make that claim?
Well, they say it's going to keep the network from going down, and they say over 20 years it will save the money. The problem is batteries only last 12 years, so that the 20-year thing is goofy also. Next. Well, here's the problem with batteries, and we're missing part of the chart here, but
I'm sorry, I don't know what happened.
it's all right. I'll brief it. So the National Renewable Energy Laboratory says if you put in a solar, it costs about $1 million per megawatt. And if you want to back that up for just 4 hours, the batteries cost $1.5 million a megawatt. But if you get rid of all your coal and gas and then you're going to need to back up maybe for 24 hours. And so now you're up to $9 million per megawatt to back up solar, which only costs you $1 million per megawatt, 9 times as expensive. And then the batteries, as I mentioned, only last 12 years. The solar lasts 20 to 25 years. So to back up solar, for example, costs more than 10 times, the battery cost is more than 10 times the cost of the solar itself. Just not a good bargain.
Okay, but I mean, this is serious business. This is why we're actually having this town hall, is because there are these live bills down there and discussions among Democrats to add grid scale batteries, because they think that will solve part of their problems with wind and solar not being a dispatchable thing. And in fact, in this one article, they say, this is a quote from Senator Cunningham, who's one of the leaders on this. With energy prices skyrocketing across the country and leaders in Washington opening the floodgates for fossil fuels, our bill makes it clear that Illinois will remain at the forefront of lowering energy costs while investing in clean energy. This is a lie.
Yeah, the article says over 20 years they're going to save $2.4 billion because they won't have outages. The problem is that the batteries, they want to put in 15 gigawatts. 15 gigawatts of battery is going to cost $22 billion to save $2.4 billion. And it won't be over 20 years because the batteries only last 12 years. So the numbers are way, way off. And that doesn't even count the cost of the solar. But yeah, they spout this stuff and somebody tells them that and they say, oh yeah, I think that's the thing.
Well,
but it's just not accurate.
They're planning on having CCP-backed Goshen build these batteries too, which is another problem because they've already gotten, subsidies from the state taxpayers. And it's so costly when we have the second largest coal deposits in the entire country. Oh, by the way, we don't have a whole lot of oil, but guess what, folks? We refine oil. We're like the 4th largest refinery of oil in the nation. So everything that's big and bad, we find out, oh, we're the 4th largest refinery of oil. I mean, these people don't know even the fundamentals about energy or energy policy in Springfield, and they're making policy decisions on you and me and the rest of the business world. And it's just absolute nonsense.
Okay, next slide. We do need to move.
Right. Okay.
There's one other problem with these grid scale batteries, and that is they burn up. Moss Landing, California, fire this year, 40% of the largest battery facility in the world burned up. San Diego, they had one burn for 7 days. They put it out 3 times. And then they got to tell these residents to leave their homes, for a period of time. Chalmont, New York, they had 3 battery fires this year. So the local people should be opposing these things. These are not good. Let's move on. Show Kamala Harris.
Oh, okay.
As the administrator shared, we are also announcing funding for, yes, one of my favorite topics, electric school buses.
Okay, next slide. So Illinois has an electric school bus program. They got roughly 20 million federal grant to deploy 70 buses at the end of the Biden term. Governor Pritzker says, with this funding, we're building on our progress toward a more sustainable future by providing 9 school districts with the resources to advance our clean energy goals. What they don't tell you is that the electric bus price is 3 times the diesel bus price. And then if you can put up the video on the electric buses, maybe just a couple of these. This one's in London. This is a burning electric bus here. Let's go to the next one. This is in Paris. Now, normally you can put these out, a bus driver with a fire extinguisher if it's a diesel bus. But look at these things explode. There's no way you can put these out. And Lord, but God forbid, I really am unhappy about the day when we might have kids on these buses and they explode. So here's another one. This one is in China. I just tell my kids and grandkids, you don't want to be riding on these electric buses if you can avoid it. Okay, let's move on. Possible energy futures. It's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. Yogi Berra. Next slide. This is my book, Green Breakdown. It talks about higher energy prices, electricity blackouts that are coming, government's efforts to limit your stove and car choices, and then transnational energy shocks like we saw in Spain. People are going to demand a return to low-cost, reliable energy. Next slide. We're going to have rising electricity prices. The big example is California, of course, green California, that is now second in the nation. Illinois is a little below the national average right now, which is good because of all of our nuclear. But we put in all these batteries and all this wind and solar. We're going to be right up there as well. Next. Actually, U.S. power outages are increasing. This is, I think we're running out of time here, Jeannie. Maybe I should.
It's okay. We have time. Go ahead.
Okay.
It's fine.
So this is from the Department of Energy that tracks the hours of outage for every power user. And back in 2013, 2014, the average electrical customer was seeing about 3.5 hours of outage cumulative in a year. Now that's running 5, 6, or 7 hours a year. And that's because we're putting in these intermittent renewables, and the more of them we put in, the more likely we are to have outages. Next. Your viewers should realize nothing is zero emissions. If you build any kind of building and you put copper in it, and you put ceramic in it, and glass in it, and steel, and wood, and cement, concrete, I should say, all of those things emit carbon dioxide when we produce them and when we transport them. You literally cannot even build a grass hut that is zero emissions. If you cut down grass and cut down wood, build a hut, you emit carbon dioxide. That's the way the world works. Next.
That's excellent.
So let's solve real environmental problems. Water pollution is a big one, not in the U.S. or Europe much, but we still have 80% of the world's wastewater is discharged untreated into rivers, lakes, and streams. We need to build water treatment plants across the world. Plastic
We
litter
still
in the
have.
oceans.
Wait, Steve. We still have. By the way, this program doesn't stop anytime. We can just go as long as you want. We still have 400,000 lead service pipes in Chicago that need to be replaced. Why don't they spend money on that instead of batteries?
That would make sense. Yeah, need to do that. And then plastic litter in the ocean, somewhat overstated, but we've got about 10 million tons that's going into the oceans every year. There's about 100 million tons out there. Almost none comes from the U.S. and Europe. Again, it's developing nations. They will improve it over time, but that's still a problem to be solved. Next. All right, great news about global warming. What we're doing in Illinois is not causing dangerous global warming. Water vapor is Earth's dominant greenhouse gas. Human industry is responsible for 1 or 2% of Earth's greenhouse effect. And because climate is natural, thousands of laws across hundreds of nations are not going to have a measurable impact on global temperatures. Anyway, and that's it. So last slide, and please look for my books. And then any comments we want to make, or I could stay as long as you want, Jeannie. We can answer questions.
Sure. I do have a question here. What's the latest with Congress and the IRA alternative energy subsidies? Are they going away? I know I think that's part of the big, bad, beautiful bill.
Yeah.
And
Well,
they're trying to figure that out.
Kind of disappointed. The Inflation Reduction Act is shoveling $80 to $100 billion a year, $1 trillion a decade from the federal government to wind, solar, biofuels, electric car charging, batteries, carbon dioxide capture and storage, pipelines, green hydrogen, all this stuff that would not exist without with federal government subsidies. And it looks like right now that that a lot of this stuff is not going to be cut out in the big, beautiful bill. So I'm kind of disappointed, but we'll see. Mr. Trump may come in and step on some of this. He doesn't want this to be there, but a lot of the Republicans have come down on the side. Well, we can't hold all these programs. We got to keep subsidizing all these renewables. So we'll just have to see.
Okay, and my assistants were, I think, writing down any questions that came into the comment section. Do we have any more questions? Okay, I don't see any, but I just, again, Steve, I want to thank you so much for doing this presentation. This is something that we should be doing down in Springfield in front of all the legislators. They should be understanding and hearing this information. It's great. And they just don't seem to want to. And so it's your job, listening audience, to talk to your legislators. We've now told you what is fact and what's fiction. I have already teed up and told you, as have others that have been listening in, other good conservative state reps down there. They've been warning you about what's going on. Prior to CEJA, I went on a tour of a coal plant and a nuclear facility, and we saw the wind and we saw the solar. We did it all. We did an energy tour with the conservative state reps, Chris Miller, Dave Halbrecht, Dan Calkins, and warned them too about CEJA. CEJA is a failure. They keep on trying to tweak it. Every time they do, it costs you more money. And both the MISO region and the ComEd region, customers all received notice that they are going to get a capacity charge of 10 to 15%. That's just the beginning. If they continue down this road of solar, it's going to get worse when they add batteries to the equation. And we should not have to pay for expensive boondoggles when we have cheap, reliable energy at our right here produced in the state of Illinois. So I don't know, Steve, any final thoughts on how you wake people up?
Another thing is, I know, as I understand, the state government has overruled many counties that have tried to put in restrictions on wind and solar. They don't want them in the county, but the state has just said, well, those laws don't matter. We're just going to overrule you, and we're going to put these in regardless what the local citizens think. So that's not the way things should be done. And we need to get back to people matter, and the left-leaning government should have a little bit more sense.
I agree. And it's not J.B. Pritzker or the Chicago Democrats that are having a wind farm, next door to them, and a windmill in Lake Mission. That's not happening to them. They would hate it if they did. And so I say, you first. All right, that concludes our presentation tonight. Again, Steve Goreham, thank you so much for being on with us tonight. I know this is going to get thousands of views because it's such great information.
Great to join you, Jeannie. Keep up your great work. Thanks.
You bet. We're going to end the stream now. Thank you all for listening.